Welcome to the first episode of the Weston Hunt's History Lessons, the show where two different views collide to bring you historical information you need. I'm David Hunt, and today my special guest is going to be Zach Wilson.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Hunt.
All right, so what's the first topic you want to be about?
Well, I think we start off talking about Thomas Jefferson and how he made one of maybe the most important documents of all time.
Okay.
The Declaration of Independence. Literally declared her independence from Britain.
Okay.
It's like, that's what it literally did. And plus, like, Thomas Jefferson's just like that guy, I feel like, in history.
Okay. I would agree with you that he was a very prominent figure. I don't think he was the most important, especially during the Revolution. I feel like that was George Washington. He was the general of the army. But you're not wrong. The Declaration of Independence was, it was what separated us from Britain and gave us our own government.
Yeah.
So I think one thing we should mention with the Declaration is that after the Declaration, they started talking about the Articles of Confederation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it started breaking down because...
See, now with the Articles of Confederation, I feel like personally, it had its flaws. It was obvious, Shays' Rebellion, this, that, and the other. But, like, I feel like they could have tweaked it just like a tad bit where it would work, personally. Because, Shays' Rebellion, was like a very prominent, time and a very prominent, like, date to show the flaws of our country. But at the same time, they didn't have to fully scrap it. I thought a lot of the things that it said was, like, good.
Okay. I think, personally, they should have it was a good idea that they scrapped it because if you look, like, when they were talking about, they didn't want the federal government to have too much power, so they gave the states all the power. Well, you look at, like, Shays' Rebellion, for example, like Whiskey's Rebellion. They both were able to almost overthrow the state government because there was no extra help within the state. So, like when Shays' Rebellion happened in, Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
They almost took over Pennsylvania. They almost pushed them back. They got very close. And the only reason they lost was because Pennsylvania had finally been able to push them back far enough to take enough men.
Yeah, I can see that, but at the same time, mostly it was mad because of taxation on everything. Which the taxes back then, they've been getting taxed for since Jamestown back in them days, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I can understand it, but the way that they did it, they could have just not went out and destroy and this, that, and the other, which it is a prominent thing. It shows that the ideas that we have today, like the freedom to assembly in the First Amendment, that's completely fair. And I feel like that's where it strives from. But they could have done it a lot more peacefully. They could have done it to where they could get to understand, because I feel like everybody at that time, they just did not want to be taxed.
But if you think about it, if it wasn't for that rebellion, we wouldn't really have the government we have now, because the Articles of Confederation would be still in place. And then the Articles of Confederation basically made every state its own nation. They were living in a nation, but it made them their own government. So, for example, there's not a national law. So when you have Kentucky National Guard, if a riot breaks out in Louisville, the Kentucky National Guard gets sent out. If that's the only government we have for all the people in Louisville, that's going to be pretty bad. But that's why they send out the United States National Guard. And that's why they send out the police. And that's why they send everything else out, because there's now that the federal government has more power, it's easier. Because what happens if we went to war during the Articles of Confederation days?
We would have been fried. So I can see. We would have been completely fried. And I feel like one of the biggest prominent emotions in all of history is just ignorance. I feel like a lot of people are ignorant these days. And back then especially. Because, I thought Shays' Rebellion was ignorant. But, like you said, it did bless us with these, the Kentucky Guard, National Guard, to help us out. If there is a big riot, they can't stop.
All right, so the next topic I wanted to talk about was George Washington, his farewell address. I mean, we both know he said some things that, looking back on today, that we basically broke all the rules of. For example, the political party aspect. He didn't want any political party, and if he wanted parties, because he knew eventually they were going to split, he wanted at least 3. Well, now we only have 2 major ones, and even right after he got out of office, there was only 2 major ones.
Yeah.
He talked about his foreign relations policy, obviously with the British and the French. He had battled with them many times. And
Yeah, and he just wanted to keep it to where America was by themselves, pretty much. He didn't want no foreign relations with nobody, no alliances, no conflict, no nothing. Even whenever the French did, help us out, give us weapons, but he wanted it so we didn't have to pay debt to the French, and he never wanted that to happen to our country ever again. And that was kind of smart, which I think this is the only part we're both agreeing on with this, is that George Washington's views during his farewell address was very strong, but of course the rules got broken. So, I mean, that's just how society is
well,
nowadays.
Washington, he didn't really make these rules. He wanted them to just listen, because he knew that if we split into 2 parties, it would just divide the country. So, like when Hamilton and Jefferson split, they didn't like each other the whole time during his presidency anyway. But when they split, they made 2 different parties. Jefferson made the Democratic Republican, while Hamilton was a Federalist, and they just didn't see eye to eye on things like banks, state rights, the self-government.
I think personally Jefferson had a good idea with the states being able to govern themselves, which now we look at it, they like the Federalists, you have the federal government obviously, and they have the state governments. I feel like the way that now they're like together, but back then, that I think Jefferson's idea of the state government to be able to be self-governed for each state, that's like a very big stepping stone to a centralized government. But I do agree with Hamilton talking about like how he wanted, one big nation just to be able to stay together, so we wouldn't have, like rebellions and other stuff like we mentioned before.
Yeah. Well, John Adams, ran against Jefferson for that party, for the Federalist Party. And even though John Adams he was the one who was going to be the president, but Alexander Hamilton was kind of the one backing him, was a bigger, a big name backing him, and was kind of telling him, and obviously John Adams agreed to the same policies, otherwise he would have ran for the presidency.
Yeah.
And like, when it comes to like the George Washington thing with the foreign relations, Hamilton wanted, he was pro-Britain. He wanted, peace with Britain. Whereas, Jefferson wanted pro-France.
France helped us out throughout the whole revolution. They supplied us with weapons, food, all these things to help us take over the British. And it kind of made up, I can understand it. You wanted to keep a good relation with Britain, just in case if anything did happen, it wouldn't have been bad. Like, because Britain obviously is a lot more stronger, but with the help of France, we was able to kick them out.
Well, yeah, but we also, when we kicked them out, we still fought them. We fought them for years, and I think we kind of just got tired of fighting them, and they're a big name. They're a big power. They were a very big power. So you'd want to have that on your side. But he didn't really want us to get involved with their affairs. He didn't want us to get involved with the British fighting anybody, or like the French Revolution. He didn't want us to get involved in that with Napoleon.
Yeah, that's what George Washington always wanted. They didn't want us to help France or Britain. They didn't want to help them at all. But now, nowadays, obviously with Ukraine and NATO, those policies just keep on getting broken every single day. Now we're in a one big pact, NATO pact. So it's kind of like,
Yeah, but in that same sense, if we never went over there, look at World War II. If we had never started messing with foreign relations, then we would have been attacked by Nazi Germany.
Exactly.
So it kind of...
Sometimes you have to do it. Like, you have to step in. But then now, like, for unnecessary conflicts that have nothing to do with America, we can look back and say George Washington was right. That's both ways, either way.
Yeah, and like, when we made the political parties, right, nowadays you got 2 major ones, Democratic and Republican. Well, people say, there's a Green Party, there's an Independent Party, but those aren't major parties. They don't have any real seats.
When was the last time an independent was in the presidential race? Do you know? Because I don't know.
Well, there's always been an independent in the race, but they've never gotten anywhere close.
Yeah, they've never been.
Probably
I mean,
It was
RFK
probably a long
recently.
time ago. It was probably a long time ago when it was actually a good
Yeah.
contender.
And then RFK went to go with Trump. So that's what happened.
Well, speaking of this, let's just talk about the banks that Hamilton wanted. Hamilton wanted national banks in order to help, it helps everybody. The national bank helps everybody. I mean, you use a national bank. I use a national bank now.
Yeah, but Jefferson wanted the charter banks, state charter banks, so that with the national bank, he wanted he thought there would be too much power in the national bank and it would cause economic instability. But the charter banks, it would have been equally distributed through the state, and we would have had a more, I think, equal central economy with that, and everybody could have. If you're from Kentucky, you have your money in that state, and if you can take that money out, just bring it with you. But the good thing about national banks, I will say this, is like if there's a bank in another state, you can just deposit right there.
Yeah.
That's the only good thing I think of it. But
Well, see, with national banks now, I mean, we can make. That's where our Federal Reserves is at, and that's how we get loans and business loans and house loans, and without the national bank, who was to say that these state chartered banks would give out loans like this? Because it's all from one state. So like California would have a good bank, but would Iowa have a good bank?
okay,
So,
I can see that point of view. But I think it'd make the states work harder. It'd make like if, say for example, Iowa, if they would probably go find an industry that suits them and work hard at it. It'd get more jobs for people, and it'd be able to be able to pay for those loans around the world. I can understand that too, because
But still, in that same idea, California's right there on the ocean, so they have a way easier something way easier they can make their jobs.
They got
from.
trade, they got fishing, they
Exactly. With Iowa, they'd have to trade with other states in order to get some of the equipment they would need.
got.
So it would still end up hurting them in the long run.
I can see that point of view. But like I said, I feel like the charter banks would it'd make more equality for our economy. That's what I genuinely think. And I can understand the flaws of each bank, because I guess now the better idea was to have a national bank, and now we don't have to worry about it.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have. Zach, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
God bless you, brother. I appreciate it. Everybody at home, thank you for having me on the show. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna hit the golf course. I'm gonna hopefully shoot par.
Alright guys, well that was the conclusion of this episode. I want to thank Zach for coming on the show, and I want to thank all the people behind the screen who helped record this video. And if you guys could, please smash that like button, subscribe, and donate to our Patreon. We need some money, we're broke. Thank you.